Hello everyone, Jonathan Schlack, EASM-Weather here with a severe weather update. We have an enhanced risk for severe weather today across northeastern Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin. That is where we have an enhanced risk for severe weather today. Again, that is across northeastern Minnesota and in the northwestern part of Wisconsin, where we have an enhanced risk for severe weather today. We have a slight going across the rest of Minnesota, the extreme southeastern corner of North Dakota, far eastern South Dakota, the far northeastern corner of Nebraska, northern Iowa, western Wisconsin, and the western part of the Michigan Panhandle. So, we have a marginal risk across far eastern North Dakota, extreme northwestern Minnesota, portions of eastern South Dakota, eastern Nebraska, central Iowa, much of the eastern half of Wisconsin, and central part of the Michigan Panhandle. And we also have a marginal risk for severe storms across South Florida for today. And mainly for an isolated tornado threat in South Florida, because there were several tornado warnings so far today across South Florida. So, going over to the tornado threat, today we have a 5% chance of an isolated tornado in northeastern Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin. That's where we have a 5% chance of an isolated tornado today. And we have a 2% chance of an isolated tornado across the rest of Minnesota, much of the rest of Minnesota, I should say, northern Iowa, western Wisconsin, and the far western portion of the Michigan Panhandle. So, just barely includes Michigan at all, but does include a teeny tiny part of the western Michigan Panhandle, where we have a 2% chance of an isolated tornado. And we also have a 2% chance of an isolated tornado in southern Florida. So, going over to the wind, we have a 30% chance of 58 mile per hour wind gusts or higher from thunderstorms in northeastern Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin. That's where we have a 30% chance of thunderstorm wind gusts of 58 miles per hour or higher. And we have a 15% chance of 58 mile per hour wind gusts or higher across the rest of Minnesota, much of the rest of Minnesota, I should say, southeastern South Dakota, extreme northeastern Nebraska, northern Iowa, much of the western half of Wisconsin, and the western part of the Michigan Panhandle. And we have a 5% chance of 58 mile per hour wind gusts or higher across far eastern North Dakota, far northwestern Minnesota, portions of eastern South Dakota, portions of eastern Nebraska, central Iowa, much of the eastern half of Wisconsin, and the central part of the Michigan Panhandle. Meant to go to the hail. Anyway, we have a 30% chance of large hail of 1 inch in diameter or larger in northeastern Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin. That's where we have a 30% chance of hail of 1 inch in diameter or larger. And we have a 15% chance of hail 1 inch in diameter or larger in much of the rest of Minnesota, the extreme southeastern corner of North Dakota, far eastern South Dakota, the extreme northeastern corner of Nebraska, northern Iowa, western Wisconsin, and the western part of the Panhandle of Michigan. And we have a 5% chance of hail 1 inch in diameter or larger in far eastern North Dakota, the extreme northeastern part of Minnesota, portions of eastern South Dakota, portions of eastern Nebraska, central Iowa, central Wisconsin, and parts of the northwestern Panhandle of Michigan. And if you look at the black dashed areas, that's where we have a 10% chance of hail of 2 inches in diameter or larger within the black dashed areas across western Minnesota, northwestern Wisconsin, the far eastern part of South Dakota, and northwestern Iowa. And going over to the summary, scattered severe thunderstorms capable of very large hail, damaging wind gusts, and a few tornadoes will be possible across parts of the upper Midwest late afternoon and early evening. Going over to the Day 2 outlook, we now have an enhanced risk for severe storms across southeastern Iowa, the extreme northeastern corner of Kansas, northern Missouri, and north and west central Illinois, where we have an enhanced risk for tomorrow. We have a slight that covers southeastern Nebraska, northeastern Kansas, portions of Missouri, central Iowa, much of the northern half of Illinois, south central and southwestern Michigan, northern Indiana, and the northwestern corner of Ohio, where we have the slight. And we have a marginal that covers parts of eastern Colorado, the north central panhandle of Texas, the panhandle of Oklahoma, and northwest Oklahoma, much of Kansas, portions of southeast Nebraska, the southwestern corner of Nebraska, portions of Iowa, central Missouri, southern Wisconsin, central Illinois, central Indiana, northwestern Ohio, and much of Michigan for the marginal for tomorrow. Going over to the tornado threat, we have a 2% chance of an isolated tornado in southeastern Nebraska, northeastern Kansas, south central and southeastern Iowa, northern Missouri, much of the northern half of Illinois, northwestern Indiana, and southwestern Michigan for that 2% chance of an isolated tornado tomorrow. Going over to the wind, we have a 30% chance of 58 mile per hour wind gusts or higher from thunderstorms in southeastern Iowa, northeastern Kansas, northern Missouri, and portions of west central Illinois. And we have a 15% chance of 58 mile per hour wind gusts or higher in southeastern Nebraska, the far southeastern corner of Nebraska, I should say, northeastern Kansas, portions of northern Missouri, portions of northern Illinois, portions of northern half of Illinois, I should say, parts of southeastern Iowa, northwestern Indiana, south central and southwest Michigan, and northwest Ohio, the far northwestern corner of Ohio, for that 15% wind risk. And we have a 5% wind risk in the parts of eastern Colorado, north central Texas, the panhandle of Oklahoma, much of Kansas, the far southwestern corner of Nebraska, southeast Nebraska, portions of central Missouri, portions of central Iowa, portions of central Illinois, portions of southern Wisconsin, much of Michigan, northwest Ohio, and central Indiana. And the black dashed areas where we have a 10% chance of wind gusts of hurricane force, 74 miles per hour or higher from thunderstorms. Going over to the hail, we have a 30% risk of 1 inch in diameter hail or larger in southeastern Iowa, far northern Missouri, and northwest Illinois. We have a 15% chance of hail of 1 inch in diameter or larger in far southeastern Nebraska, northeastern Kansas, northern Missouri, central Iowa, northern Illinois, southwest Michigan, and northwestern Indiana. And a 5% hail risk covers northeast Colorado, portions of southwest and southeast Nebraska, much of Kansas, parts of Iowa, and northern Missouri, southern Wisconsin, central Illinois, portions of Indiana, northwest Ohio, and much of Michigan. And the black dashed area is where we have a 10% chance of 2 inch in diameter hail or larger. Going over to the summary for tomorrow, severe thunderstorms are most likely across southern Iowa into northern portions of Missouri and Illinois during the late afternoon and early evening on Thursday. Very large hail, destructive wind gusts, and a couple of tornadoes are possible. You're going to want to pay attention to later statements and watches and warnings from the National Weather Service in the affected areas both today and tomorrow. Stay safe in the affected areas today and tomorrow, and I will have another update tomorrow. Take care.